Do you ever want to share a free resource or link with users and you want to capture their name and email? In today's video, I'm going to show you how to set this up using Google Sheets and Google Apps Script to where you can have a link for each target link that will present the users with a simple form where they can enter their name, they can enter an email, and then click Get Access, and it will redirect them automatically to your target link while capturing their email on the backend. All right, let's jump right in with the Google Sheet setup. So the Google Sheet, we have two tabs. One's called links and the other's called emails. This one's a little easier to describe. We just have a date, description, name, and email that we'll capture. And then on the setup side, we have the links. And so here we have an ID for each row, and then a description for what that project or what that link describes, and then the link that we'll send them to after they fill out the form. And then this generated link is what we're going to use to give to the user that's going to associate with ID. So that way we know which link they're going to get. So let's go ahead and jump into the back end, and we'll go extensions and app script. And then once this is opened up, let's go ahead and we'll just call this email capture. And then we have our code.js. And so here's where we'll put our app script. And let's go ahead and create our HTML file. And we can call this form, you can call it index, whatever. It doesn't overly matter. We're going to replace this in a minute, but let's go ahead and go back to code.js. And we're going to create our first function, which is going to be called doGet. And so this doGet function is what AppScript uses to present data to a link. And so we'll see that here in a minute when we do a deployment. But for now, let's go ahead and just do this coding. So we're going to create some HTML, and we're going to use the HTML service to do this. And then under those methods, we have different things. We're going to use create template from file. And then we use a file name. And so it's a file name existing over here. And so we're going to use form. And you don't do the .html, you just do the name. And then finally, we're going to do evaluate, and then we can return that. So that's the simple basic function here. And then we're going to create another one. We're going to go the HTML first. Let's go ahead and just name this. And so we're going to go ahead and name this record email. And then in this function, we're going to get some data from the HTML. So we'll just say maybe data, and then we'll just open up that function. So we'll come back and fill this in later, but we're just going to put it here as a placeholder. So now let's go to our form HTML and start building this out. So one thing I'm going to use to speed this up is using something called Bootstrap. And so in Bootstrap, we'll just open up this getbootstrap.com. And let's go ahead and go to read the docs. And then it gives us this quick start section here. And we're going to use the second one. We're going to include the CSS and JS. And so let's go ahead and just copy this whole thing here. Or you can just click this copy to clipboard. And then we're just going to replace this whole thing and paste that. So we can go ahead and leave this head part of the HTML up here. We can rename this title if you like. It's not really necessarily used in this web app format, but we'll just call this email capture. And then in our body is where we're going to do our coding. So we have two parts of this. One's our HTML, and then we're going to add some scripting. So we can go ahead and get rid of this for now. And then inside this, what we're going to use is some divs. And so Bootstrap uses these different layout things. You can use whichever ones you like. I like using containers, and it's just a quick building block. And so they have different ones here, so you can use different size containers. Let's see here, container small maybe. We'll just go ahead and use that one. So the way you use this is we're going to open up a div, and then class is going to equal this. And actually, we go ahead and delete that period. And then we'll go ahead and close that div. And then we're going to add some space here. So this is going to be our overarching container or form that we're going to put everything inside of. So I'm just going to add a little BR. So BR is a new line tag. Maybe two of them. Just give us a little space at the top. And then next we need some form stuff. We need some inputs. And so if I scroll down here on the left-hand side, we'll go to input group, and that gives us different examples that we can use. And so you can use things like where the labels above, labels in line. And so I think we'll just use the inline ones for this example. And so we'll do something like this. We'll just change that @ symbol to email or name. And so the way their coding works here is under the example, they'll have some HTML, and it's going to be in order. And so if you see this @ username, if we look here at this top one, we'll see @ and username. And so this is the one that looks like that. So we'll go ahead and copy this. We'll come over here. Inside of our container, we're going to add 2 of these. And now we can just rename these for our purposes. And so this first one we'll use for the name. So we go ahead and just add a little HTML comment here. And so this will be our name field. And then I'm going to do the same thing. We'll call this one our email field. And now we can update these for those purposes. So under name field, we have this overarching div. And so this div is just wrapping our 2 elements together. And then so this will change to name, and you can either do full name, or if you want to use a different one for first and last, you can do that, whatever you like there. And then in this input tag, we have a placeholder. And so this says username. And so we could just say full name, or we could say first, last, or something like this, whatever makes sense to you, whatever you want to use there. Here we can just say name, and then we'll say name field, like that. And this one we'll call email, and email field. And then we're going to change this type to email, and placeholder, you can put it whenever you want here. So email @ domain.com, something like that. And then we'll change this to email. So at this point, we have this basically ready. One more thing we're going to add on these inside this input tag here is we're going to add an ID, and we're going to use this to find this later. And so we'll call this name, and then we'll call this one email, and we'll use that to grab those later. So we need one more thing in our form is a button. And so let's go ahead and look up here for buttons. And so that'll be under components. Under buttons, we can look at the buttons here. So there's different buttons you can use. You can use blue, green, whatever one you like. I like using green ones. I just like green. And so I'm going to use this as my button. So I'm going to copy that, bring this in here. And then I'm going to change this one to, let's just say get access, since we're looking at giving access once they fill in their info. And then we'll call this one ID equals submit. All right, so let's add one more thing. So we didn't add a title at the top of this. So let's go ahead and add that real quick. And we'll just do maybe H4, enter, or H3, H4. Let's do H4. Enter your email to gain free access. And I'm going to put a little asterisk here, and we'll put a little text at the bottom. And this is where you could link to your privacy policy, whatever is there. And so down here, let's go ahead and add a couple BR tags. And then let's do in Bootstrap, you can do this thing called small, and that's just going to add some small text. And so I'm just going to copy a little text here. This is just fairly generic. And then we'll close our small tag here. And then maybe add another BR. There we go. All right, so now we have our button here. We have our email and our name, our header here. So we got pretty much our HTML done. And so now all we really need to do is add some scripting to make it all work. So if you take a look at our file here, we have our script here, and this is our Bootstrap. So we don't want to do anything with that one. So what we want to do is underneath that, we'll add a new script, and this is where we're going to add our scripting. I can type here without a typo. Now, in our script, what we need to do is a couple things. So we have our HTML for them to type in their name and email, and we want that to go to this Google Sheet and drop in here. And then we want to get back the target link and then basically redirect that page to that link. So let's start with the first part, which is going to be getting their name and email that they typed in and send it to Google Sheet. Now, first thing we need to do is actually make something happen. Right now, nothing's going to happen if we click on this button, for example. And so let's go ahead and do that first. And so we're going to do that using this document get element by ID. And then we're going to get that submit and add an event listener. And then under the event listener, we're going to use the click. And then we're going to send it to a function. And so we'll call this function email submitted. And so what this is going to do is when the HTML loads, it's going to add this event listener saying, if you click the button, run the script. So let's go ahead and create this function real quick, email submitted. And then in our function, let's do a little cleanup first. So when this event listener is on here, if they click the button twice, it's going to make this run twice. And so that might result in some unexpected behavior. You're going to have this running multiple times and stuff like that. So we want to prevent that from happening. So first of all, let's copy this and paste it in here. We're just going to change this from add to remove. And so what this is going to do is when they click the button, it's going to keep it from running each time they click the button from then on. So it's going to stop it while we get a chance to process. And then another thing I like to do is just a quick visual change. And so let's say we start with this green one, or you start with this blue one, whichever one you like. I want to change it to this gray color after we click it. It's just a quick visual indicator that something has changed. And so if we look at these, the only thing that's different is this class is slightly different. This one's BTN or button dash secondary. This one's BTN dash success. So I'm just going to copy this real quick. And then how do we actually do that here? So we can actually use a very similar method here, document got element by ID. Get element by ID, and we're going to get that button again. Now this time we're going to use a method called class list, and then we're going to remove the original one, which was BTN success. And then let's go ahead and just copy this whole line, paste it, and then we're going to change this one to add. And then now we're going to grab our new one. And so what this is going to do on our button, you can see right here, BTN dash success. It's going to remove that and replace it with this BTN secondary. And so functionally what's going to do is make it turn from this into this. And that will give the user a little visual indication that we're actually doing something. And so next, let's go ahead and grab their name and email from their inputs. And so we're going to do that let name, and we're going to use the same document get element by ID and get it from our name field. That's why we added that ID name. And then dot value. And then we're going to do the same thing for email. So we'll copy and paste that. And then let's just update these two fields here. Just like that. So now we have set up our form. We've gotten our name and email. And so now we actually need to send it to our Google Sheet. And so we can't send it directly to the Google Sheet. We're going to have to use an intermediary in our code.js. And so we have a function set up here, but we need to send our data to it. And then we'll have to come over here and take that data and add it to here. So let's start with that first step in HTML. And so in AppScript, for these web apps, it gives us a couple native functions. And so let's go ahead and do Google script. And then what we're going to do is run. Now, there's a couple different things we can do here. And one we're going to use is with success handler. And so what this is saying is when we run a script, if it comes back successfully, we're going to run another function in here. And so let's call that redirect. And so let me go ahead and create that real quick. So function redirect. In this function redirect, we want to grab the URL that comes back and then we'll do something with it. So we won't write this function yet, but we're just going to say URL is what we're going to expect to come back in that redirect, and then we'll do something here. So that's our placeholder. And then so we have our with success holder, but then we actually need our function. And so our function is going to be the name here. So record email. And so we're going to do record email. And then inside of our parentheses, we want to send this data. So we're going to actually make a little, let's call it data, make a little array, and we'll put name, email. And now we can put that data in our record email. All right, so this is enough to get started. Now we can go back to our code.js. And in this, now this data is going to include basically this. So how do we get that and put it into our Google Sheet? So we could do something super simple, and let's just start with that. So let's access our spreadsheet first. So we'll declare our let ss variable equal to spreadsheet app, get active spreadsheet, and then we want to drop it on this emails tab. So let's get that email sheet. And we'll do that sheet by name, emails. So in a very basic way, we could just do email sheet, append row, and data. And this is going to be a very simple way. So we're going to have to modify this a little bit because we haven't, at this point, done anything with the ID or the URL. And we're actually missing a date and description. We can actually add the date. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll just do let today, and we're going to use this utilities format date. And then in here, you can kind of see an example. We're going to use something like this. So new date creates a new date. Let's do that. Then we need a time zone. So you can enter this manually if you know your GMT minus or plus, whatever it is. Or if you have this spreadsheet in here, we can do ss.get spreadsheet time zone. And then finally, what format do we want the date to show up in? So I'm just going to pick month, a single digit for the month, and then a single for day, 2-digit for the year. And then I'm going to do 1h lowercase for 12 hour, and then minutes. Then finally a single A, and that stands for AM, PM. So at this point, this isn't going to work because I have this append row data, but I haven't included today. So I'm going to have to kind of restructure this a little bit. So currently this data is name, email. So how do I add today in, say, right here? So I could do data unshift and do today. And that's probably the fastest and easiest way to do that. So we'll leave that for now. And then I'll show you a different way of doing that later when we pull in our description here that we want to add. So currently this description isn't going to be in here yet. So I'm just going to move it over just for the moment. And then let's go ahead and see if this works. So what we want to do is deploy. And the first time you do this, you'll need to do new deployment. And then we're going to pick web app. And then one thing to make sure you do is who has access, make sure you change that to anyone. And then we'll click deploy. So it needs to some access here. So we'll go ahead and authorize that real quick. And this is just Google's little disclaimer. So we'll go to email capture and click allow. And so here's the key, this web app URL right here. So we're going to go ahead and copy that. And then we can actually click on this as well. And what we're going to see is the HTML we put in. One thing I did not do, and so let's actually do that real quick, is actually add a little bit of background. And so if we go to here, let's do background color. There we go. So here we have some different background colors. And so I just want to add something kind of more subtle. And so if you notice before, this time I'm just not going to copy the period. You don't need to use the period here. And so I'm just going to do background dash light dash subtle. And then let's look at adding a little padding. And so here we have M sets margin, P sets padding, and then it tells you the different padding that you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and add, let's just put 4 for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you what happens. So on the web apps, if you make a change to your HTML, you have to redeploy for those changes to be read. So I just made some changes. If we go here and refresh, it looks exact same, and it's because we haven't redeployed. So anytime you make a change in the HTML, you got to click on the deploy button again, manage deployments, and then here click this edit on this pencil or pen icon here. And then we want to, under version, click on new version. So you can add descriptions here if you like. It's good practice to do so. You don't have to. But if you're making a lot of versions and different changes, you may want to keep a record of what's happening here. So for example, we could say added background color and then hit deploy. Now we go here and hit refresh. I don't know if you can even see it. It's very faint. So I'm actually going to go back to background color. Let's pick this dark subtle. And then redeploy again. And let's check this out. There we go. That's a little better. So we have this set up. At this point, if everything is correct and I didn't make any typos, we should be able to enter this and have something pop up in here. Let's go ahead and check it out. So in our name, I'm just going to do literally first last, email@domain.com, and click get access. So our button did change colors. That's good. And let's go ahead and check it out. Oh, look at that. So there's a date time, name, first last, email@domain.com. So that did come through. So that is perfect. So now what we need to do is go to one more level. So first of all, we need to incorporate into this what project we want, or ID. So we have these IDs here, and as you're using this, maybe you'll have more, maybe you only have one. So if you have one, then you could just literally bake this in and just have this redirect here, and you don't really need to get feedback from the Google Sheet. But if you want more than one ID, more than one target link, we're going to have to somehow figure out from here, what project are we using so we can get the correct one back. And so the way we're going to do that is through something called a query parameter. And so it's something that you actually add to the URL. And so the way you do that is a question mark, and then something like ID equals to SN100. So we can go ahead and hit enter, that's fine. And so this is what we're looking at, is adding something like this. And so at this point, we just need a way to get it from here, send it through with this data. So something like ID. And then on our code.js, we need to look that ID up and then send this target link back. And so how are we going to do that? Let's go ahead and jump right in. So currently we have this just sitting here. We need something to get this ID from our query parameter. And then you may be already ahead of me, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this URL and we're going to generate links with that ID appended at the end, just so you know where we're going. Now in here, what we're going to do is we're going to actually wrap this inside of a function. It's actually another Google one, script.url get location. Let's go ahead and make sure that's spelled correctly. And then inside this, what we're going to do is, I'm actually going to add this down here. Inside this, we're going to do location and then some arrow syntax to make a function in here. And so now in here, we're going to pull our data thing in here as well. And then we need to get our ID. So the way we do that is I'm just going to go ahead and declare a variable called ID. And so the way this works is location is now our reference point. And so I'm going to say location dot parameter. And then the parameters, you can have multiple parameters. And so, for example, we could do and name equals Fred and location equals etc. But in this case, we only have one. And the way we reference it is by the name of that parameter, which in this case is ID. And so if we do location.parameter to get our URL parameters and then .id, now we have that ID. And so now in our data, we can say ID name email. And so all we need to do at this point is update our code.js to handle that lookup. And then we just need to ping that back so we can redirect. First, let's go ahead and move our email stuff. I guess we can put this whole thing down. And then let's populate our data here. And we're going to go ahead and manually make one. So first, let's get that links tab. We'll do let links equals ss, get sheet by name, links. And then next, let's get our IDs, our descriptions, and our target links. We'll just get them in separate arrays just to make that a little easier. So IDs equals to links, get range, and then we'll just start at row 2. Go back, start row 2, and the IDs is in column 1. Starting row, starting column, number of rows, and number of columns. So number of rows is going to be links.getLastRow. But this last row is not including the fact that we're starting at row 2. So we're just going to subtract 1 to even that out, and then 1 column. And at this point, we can now get values. And then I'm just going to apply this flat method. And what that does is it converts that array from 2D, which is multiple brackets, into 1. And that just makes it easier to search and parse. So let's go ahead and get our other ones. So IDs, and then descriptions and URLs. So let's go ahead and update these now. Description and URLs. And then we need to come over here and update that column. So it's going to be that first column 1. So 2 and 3. And then now we need to, so let's, first of all, we have this error because I have data and then I reuse data here. So I'm going to change this. Let's just call it row. And I'm going to change this to row as well. So we'll address that here in a second. But what we need to do now is we need to get from this data our ID so we can look it up. And so let's go ahead and just do that up here. So we'll say ID equals to data. Now, how do we get that piece of data out of there? So the way you do array is if you do the array name and then a bracket, starting at 0, you can basically count through and get each element. So this would be ID, this would be name, and this would be email. So array indexing or numbering starts at 0. So this is 0, 1, and 2. So that's how we can reference and get that data out of that array over here. So here we could do 0. And then we can do our name and email. And then make sure we update those. So now we've gotten our ID, name, and email. And at this point, now we can cycle through over here and find our ID. And we're going to use that called index IDs index of. And so we were just talking about index. And so this index of searches for something inside this array. So we're going to search for ID. And so then, because these are also arrays of the same size, now we can say let project equal to description index. And the same thing with URL. URLs index. So because we have these arrays are all the same size, all start in the same row. So if we look in this one and find SN100, and so this is row 2, but this would be index 0. Then in description would be like, hey, what's index 0 here? Oh, it's Google. What's index 0 here? Google.com. And so then that gives us these to then use. So at this point now in here, we can do our, I need to move this up here. We can do today, project, name, and email. And now that will add that data. And the only thing we have left to do is now take that URL and send it back to the HTML. The way we're going to do that is at the end of here, just like we did with the HTML up here, we're going to use this return and that URL. And so in our HTML, where we had this Google script.run with success handler, this with success handler is going to run with whatever we returned. So we're returning URL. And so now that we're sending the URL back to this function redirect, we can now redirect our browser to google.com. The way we're going to do that is window top.location.href equals to URL. And so this will redirect. We'll say redirect browser to specified URL. And so here's our email submitted. Run when button is clicked. So I'm just adding a little bit of context here. So if you're looking at this, you can kind of get an idea of what's happening. At this point, we should be all good to go. We have our script all put together. We've got our code.js all put together. So at this point, if you're remembering, we need to redeploy to update our changes. Let's go ahead and new version. And this one will be getting URL from sheet. And so this URL is still gonna be the same for our web app. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you're just using that URL like this, this won't work. And the reason why is this link, if we go to here, this URL, let's go ahead and just put it in here, doesn't have that parameter. So that's what we need to add in here. And so before we progress any further, let's actually finish up by adding that generated link here. So first of all, I'm going to do it just in this cell. And so I'm going to do that link like this, and then we need to add that ID. Now, if we just do and ID, that isn't quite right. Let me go ahead and just paste it here because it's not adding that question mark and ID equals to. So we need to actually add that. Go ahead and open this up. Add that here. So question mark ID equals to and A2. And so now we have the correct formatting. And so if we click on this now, there you can see it's adding like that. So let's add one more thing to this before we go back and test this out. So this is great, but now if we add more, we will have to drag this down. And so what I'm actually going to do here is turn this into an array formula. And so array formula allows us to do it to an entire column. So I'm going to just say if A2 to A is blank, do nothing. Otherwise, let's do our thing here. So I need to remove that equals sign there and then do that A2 to A2, just like that. And so now if I do SN 101, this shows up. Let's see if I can click on that now. And there it is, SN 101. And then I have to do SN 45. There we go, 405. So this will allow you to then quickly add new IDs and new target links, and this will automatically generate it. Now, one final hack here is we can actually take this and put it inside here. And what I'm going to do here is just this array literal. And you don't have to understand how that works, but the array literal, I'm using these curly braces to dynamically create. And so that puts this generated link in row 1. And then I'm saying in a new row or rows, add this. And so if you make a copy of this project, then you'll just have this in there ready to go. All right, so now let's go ahead and put this description back here. Let's delete this row. So if everything is correct, we should be able to click on this link. Should be able to enter some data in here. Sample name and sample@gmail.com. We should be able to click this and see it update. Oh, well, look at that. That redirected. So that's perfect. And then let's check our emails. And lo and behold, our email came through. So there's our data, date, time, description, name, and email. So that is it for today's video. If this was helpful for you, make sure to like and subscribe and check out our other videos for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.